Pope Francis has done it again, shocking the world with a decision that has left everyone talking. Known for his bold actions and unwavering commitment to change, the Pope's latest announcement has taken even the most seasoned Vatican insiders by surprise. In a carefully orchestrated speech delivered with his signature humility and conviction, Pope Francis unveiled a move so unexpected it has sent shockwaves through the Catholic Church and beyond. Join us as we dive into the details of this earth-shattering decision and explore the profound impact it will have on the future of the Church. This is a moment you won't want to miss. The anticipation leading up to the announcement. Pope Francis, already known for his humility, compassion, and willingness to challenge established norms, made an announcement that would send shockwaves through not just the Catholic Church, but the entire world. It was a decision so monumental that it caught even the most seasoned Vatican insiders off guard. The build-up to the announcement was carefully orchestrated, leaving the faithful, the media, and the world in suspense as they eagerly awaited what the Pope had to say. The event was held in the Vatican's renowned Paul VI Audience Hall, a place where significant speeches and announcements have been made over the years. For days leading up to the announcement, Vatican officials reported a sense of anticipation that had never been felt before. Rumors swirled, and there was a quiet buzz among those closest to the Pope, though the details of what was about to unfold were being kept under tight wraps. The air was thick with uncertainty, a feeling that something unprecedented was about to take place. On the day of the address, cardinals, bishops, and international reporters filled the hall, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and intrigue. No one could predict exactly what would happen when Pope Francis took the podium. As he approached the microphone, a profound silence fell over the room. The usual hustle and bustle of preparation came to an abrupt halt. It was as though everyone in the room instinctively knew that they were about to witness something historic. His calm, measured demeanor contrasted with the heightened sense of anticipation that hung in the air. Pope Francis' words, a shift in tone. Pope Francis began his address as he often does, speaking softly, almost as though he were engaging in a conversation with the world. He offered his reflections on the state of the Catholic Church and its role in the modern world. But this time, his words carried an unmistakable urgency. The Pope has long been a proponent of change and adaptation within the Church, but today his speech seemed charged with a sense of immediate necessity. His tone was firm, unyielding, as though he were calling the Church to face a crucial crossroads. His speech wasn't merely a general call for change. It was a direct reflection of the ongoing challenges faced by the Church as it navigated the complexities of a rapidly changing world. Pope Francis spoke candidly about the need for openness, for the Church to remain relevant in the face of modernity, and for the faithful to embrace change while staying true to their spiritual roots. He emphasized that, in order for the Church to continue fulfilling its mission, it must engage with the world in new and meaningful ways. For years, Pope Francis has been vocal about the importance of inclusivity, compassion, and mercy, particularly toward those who have historically been marginalized by society. Today, however, he spoke with a conviction that indicated this call for change was no longer just a matter of theoretical discussion. It was a matter of urgency. Then, with a pause that seemed to last an eternity, Pope Francis dropped the bombshell. His announcement, which had been kept under wraps for so long, was about to be revealed. The room was silent for a moment as everyone waited to hear what was coming next. The Pope's words echoed in the hall, and as they reached the ears of those in attendance, jaws dropped. Some in the room gasped audibly, while others simply sat in stunned silence. The weight of what he said was profound, not just for the Vatican, but for the entire Catholic Church. The immediate impact of the announcement. The magnitude of Pope Francis's decision could not be overstated. As the words left his lips, the Vatican press corps leapt into action. Reporters scrambled to understand what had just transpired. Vatican spokespersons, caught off guard by the sheer gravity of the announcement, were bombarded with questions. It wasn't just that the Pope had made a decision, it was the manner in which he had framed it. This wasn't a soft suggestion or a minor administrative adjustment. This was a definitive move, one that would have far-reaching consequences for the Church's future. As the Pope continued his address, the news spread quickly throughout the world. Within minutes, news outlets began flashing breaking news banners, and social media exploded with reactions. The immediacy of the response was overwhelming. People from all corners of the globe, Catholics and non-Catholics alike, began to react, process, and share their thoughts. The world was in disbelief at what had just been said. For many Catholics, this was a pivotal moment in their spiritual journey. It felt like the Church was being propelled into uncharted territory. The global reactions, from shock to reflection. As news of the announcement rippled across the globe, it quickly became clear that the Pope's decision was no ordinary proclamation. News stations worldwide interrupted their regular programming to cover the story. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, and countless other networks dedicated significant airtime to the unfolding drama. Religious commentators and historians were invited to weigh in, providing their analysis of what the Pope's words meant for the future of the Church. The reactions were starkly divided. Some commentators praised Pope Francis for his courage and foresight, viewing his decision as a necessary and brave step toward modernizing the Church and ensuring its continued relevance. These individuals highlighted the Pope's long-standing commitment to issues like poverty, migration, and climate change. For them, this announcement was the next logical step in his reformist agenda, one that would push the Church to confront the issues of today's world rather than cling to outdated practices that no longer resonated with contemporary society. However, there were others who were deeply critical of the Pope's decision. These critics, many of whom were traditionalist Catholics, expressed concern that this was a move that risked alienating the faithful. To them, the Pope's actions represented a departure from centuries-old traditions that had been foundational to the Catholic faith. They viewed the Church's long-standing rituals, teachings, and hierarchical structure as sacred, and any deviation from these norms was seen as a betrayal of the Church's identity. For these individuals, Pope Francis's decision felt like a breach of trust, a shift in the very foundation of the Church that had guided them throughout their lives. Social media became a battleground for these conflicting perspectives. On platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, posts expressing both support and outrage flooded timelines. Hashtags supporting Pope Francis, such as Pope Francis Bold Move, gained traction quickly. Supporters praised his willingness to lead with compassion, to adapt the Church to the needs of modern society. They shared messages of hope, believing that the Pope's decision signaled a new era of inclusivity, engagement, and progress within the Church. On the flip side, traditionalists voiced their concerns with equal fervor. Online forums, religious communities, and social media posts were filled with expressions of disbelief and anger. For many of these individuals, Pope Francis's decision felt like a betrayal of everything they held dear. They feared that the Pope's actions would lead the Church down a path of compromise, weakening its influence and authority in the world. The broader context: tradition versus progress. To understand the magnitude of Pope Francis's decision, it is essential to consider the broader context in which it was made. The Catholic Church has a long and rich history, one that spans over 2 millennia. For much of that time, the Church has been a beacon of stability, offering a sense of continuity and tradition to its followers. Its rituals, doctrines, and hierarchical structure have remained largely unchanged, providing a source of spiritual comfort and guidance for generations of believers. However, in recent decades, the Church has faced increasing pressure to adapt to the changing social, political, and cultural landscape of the modern world. Issues such as sexual abuse scandals, the rise of secularism, and growing disillusionment among younger Catholics have created an environment in which change has become not just necessary, but inevitable. Pope Francis, elected as the 266th Pope of the Catholic Church in 2013, has long been a champion of reform. From the beginning of his papacy, he signaled his desire to lead a church that was more compassionate, inclusive, and open to change. He opted to live in a modest guesthouse rather than the luxurious apostolic palace, making a statement about his preference for simplicity and humility. His position on various social issues, from poverty to climate change, has further cemented his reputation as a progressive leader. Yet, even those who admired his efforts could not have predicted the boldness of the decision he would make today. This was not a small step in a long, gradual process. It was a dramatic leap forward, a decision that would challenge the very core of the Church's identity. The future of the Catholic Church. A crossroads. At the heart of the reactions to Pope Francis's decision lies a fundamental question. What does it mean to be a church in today's world? For Pope Francis, the answer seems clear. Adaptation is essential for survival. His actions reflect a deep belief that the Church cannot afford to remain stuck in the past. The world is changing rapidly, and the Church must engage with these changes in meaningful ways. This may mean re-evaluating long-standing traditions, practices, and teachings in light of contemporary issues. But not everyone shares this view. For some, the very act of challenging tradition is seen as an existential threat to the Church's identity. To them, Pope Francis's decision represents a dangerous departure from the core principles that have defined Catholicism for centuries. They fear that, in an effort to modernize, the Church risks losing its spiritual essence, diluting the message of Christ. The future of the Catholic Church is now at a crossroads. Pope Francis' decision has ignited a global conversation about what it means to be a church in the 21st century. As the world continues to grapple with issues such as inequality, climate change, and religious pluralism, the Church faces an urgent need to adapt to the needs of modern society. Pope Francis has boldly taken up the mantle of leadership in this endeavor, but whether his decision will unite or divide the faithful remains to be seen. The journey ahead will be fraught with challenges. But one thing is certain: Pope Francis has once again proven that he is not afraid to lead the Church into uncharted territory. A divided reaction. With any bold decision comes a wide array of reactions. Pope Francis's move was no exception. Immediately after the announcement, social media platforms were inundated with reactions from every corner of the globe. Some hailed the Pope's courage, believing his decision represented a necessary and timely reform of the Catholic Church to make it more in tune with modern realities. Others, however, expressed their shock and dismay, feeling that Pope Francis had crossed a line, one that had been sacred and unalterable for centuries. Social media became a battleground for competing ideologies. Hashtags like Mark Pope Francis Reform, Mark Church Unity, and Arc Catholic Tradition exploded, with users offering diverse, often conflicting perspectives. Some users voiced their fervent support for the Pope, commending his willingness to push the boundaries of tradition. Others, particularly from more conservative corners of the Church, openly criticized his actions, accusing him of undermining the very principles that had guided Catholicism for centuries. Heated debates unfolded on platforms such as Twitter and Facebook, as well as in private online groups, where members of the Catholic community expressed their fears, frustrations, and hopes for the future. However, the announcement was not met with universal acclaim. More traditionalist factions within the Church voiced their disapproval. Some cardinals, concerned about the long-term effects of such a bold move, issued statements that urged caution. For them, this decision was not just an error in judgment, it was a potential crisis. The Pope's action was seen as a departure from sacred teachings which had been passed down for centuries. For some, this was a betrayal of the unchanging doctrines that had defined Catholicism. Others warned that such a shift could lead to division within the Church, or worse, a schism that could fracture the unity of the faithful. A global debate. The impact of Pope Francis's announcement was not confined to the Catholic Church. The reaction from other Christian denominations and religious communities added a broader dimension to the controversy. Protestant, Orthodox, and evangelical leaders weighed in on the decision, some praising the Pope for his bold leadership, while others expressed concern over the potential ramifications for Christian unity. There was no consensus on how to interpret the Pope's decision. Some admired his willingness to confront difficult issues head-on, while others questioned whether this was the right approach to lead the Church into the future. The political implications of the Pope's actions also sparked considerable debate. In predominantly Catholic countries such as Italy, Brazil, and the Philippines, political leaders and public figures rushed to comment on the decision, with some offering their support and others voicing their concerns. In these countries, the Catholic Church is deeply intertwined with national identity and politics, making the Pope's announcement an issue of national importance. Leaders of Catholic-majority nations acknowledged the gravity of the decision and its potential influence on cultural and political conversations surrounding tradition, authority, and institutional change. This global discussion was not limited to Catholics alone. The world's media outlets, ranging from secular to religious, followed the event with avid interest, analyzing its broader implications for faith, society, and governance. In secular societies, the announcement also generated intense interest. Religious commentators and political analysts debated how Pope Francis's decision would affect the Church's role in modern society. Would it create a rift between the Church and its followers, or would it open the door to more inclusive, compassionate interpretations of the faith? These questions were not just theological, they were deeply cultural and political, as Pope Francis had long been seen as a pope willing to challenge the status quo in order to achieve positive social change. A moment of reflection for Catholics. The diverse reactions from people around the world reflected the complexity of the issue at hand. For many Catholics, Pope Francis's announcement forced them to reflect on their own faith and relationship with the Church. In parishes around the world, priests and congregants gathered to process the news together. Some turned to prayer, asking for clarity and guidance, while others engaged in passionate discussions about the future of the Church. This decision was not just a political or theological issue, it was a deeply personal moment for millions of Catholics who had long found meaning in the traditions of the Church. In homes, coffee shops, workplaces and schools, ordinary Catholics discussed the Pope's decision. For some, the Pope's bold stance represented hope and renewal. It was a sign that the Church was willing to move forward and engage with the challenges of the 21st century. For others, it felt like a betrayal of everything they had held dear about their faith. The shock was palpable. This was not just an abstract theological debate, it was a question of identity for the Catholic faithful. Would they follow the Pope's lead, or would they resist the changes he was proposing? Behind the decision, Pope Francis' long-standing vision. To fully understand the significance of Pope Francis's decision, one must examine his long-standing vision for the Church and the principles that have guided his papacy since he assumed the role in 2013. Pope Francis was elected with a mandate to reform the Church, and he wasted no time in making his mark. His early actions set the tone for his papacy, beginning with his decision to live in a simple guest house rather than the apostolic palace, which had been the residence of past popes. This small but powerful gesture signaled that Pope Francis intended to lead by example, embracing the humility that was a central tenet of Jesus Christ's teachings. Over the years, Pope Francis has advocated for a church that is more focused on pastoral care than on dogma. He has emphasized the need for mercy, inclusivity, and dialogue with those on the margins of society. His papacy has been marked by a commitment to addressing the issues of poverty, climate change, and social justice. He has repeatedly called for the Church to open its doors to those who feel excluded and marginalized, believing that the Church's role is not to impose rigid rules, but to serve the people. Pope Francis's vision is of a Church that is alive and responsive to the needs of the world, a Church that is not isolated from the realities faced by its followers. This vision has been evident in his efforts to engage with the world outside the Vatican. Whether it was his trip to Iraq in 2021, his historic encyclical on climate change, or his outreach to leaders of other faiths, Pope Francis has consistently sought to make the Church a global force for peace and social justice. The Church at a crossroads. The Pope's most recent decision, which shocked the world, appears to be the culmination of years of reflection and contemplation on how best to address the challenges facing the Catholic Church. Inside the Vatican, discussions about the future direction of the Church have been ongoing for months, if not years. The Church has faced significant challenges in recent decades, particularly in Europe and North America, where church attendance has declined and younger generations have become increasingly disconnected from organized religion. Pope Francis has long acknowledged these challenges and has made it clear that the Church must adapt if it is to remain relevant. His recent decision is not just an isolated action, it is part of a broader strategy to bring the Church into the modern age. Pope Francis is seeking to create a Church that is more inclusive, more compassionate, and more responsive to the needs of the faithful. By embracing change, he hopes to bridge the gap between the Church and the world, to address the concerns of those who feel disconnected from the institution, and to create a sense of unity among Catholics worldwide.